What's up, people? It's your boy Stantawn, Kendrick, coming to you with a video real quick today. This is a Q&A video. This question comes from Evan Dempsey, and it's on my video about Playalongs. And if you haven't seen that video, and if you probably subbed to me after I made that video, I'm gonna link it down in the description. So here's his question. Evan says, what about for novice improvisers? For example, I'm really still learning how to play well over changes, and play-alongs like iReal Pro have really helped me get comfortable with what I'm playing in terms of how it fits into the chords. I feel like I have enough to worry about just figuring out what to play over a set of changes without listening to the nuances of the rhythm section. I get that it's important, and I would like to get to the point where I can start to think about what kind of stuff, think about that kind of stuff, but I don't think play-alongs are all that bad for beginners. I don't think that play-alongs are a bad tool. I just believe that play-alongs shouldn't be the sole tool that you use to learn how to improvise, because I believe that they become a crutch because you're not dealing with more things that are more important to be dealt with. Based on what Evan is saying, I think at a young age, some things that you should be concerned with are some other areas of practice that could help you beyond a play along. You know, let's just say Take the A Train is what you're playing over in iReal Pro. I would suggest, before you really depend on that play along, do you know the form? Can you say, this is the form, these are the chords, doom, 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 doom. Can you say the form is these many bars? Can you say the form is AABA, ABA, ABC? Can you say that? Number two, since jazz is a style of music where in various forms of jazz, we don't just play in keys, we play around keys, we play in tonalities. Do you know the tonalities that you're dealing with, the key centers that you're dealing with, that you are approaching? Can you take your instrument and arpeggiate the chords through the form? Do you know the various possibilities of jazz theory and language that you can utilize over these chords? If the piano drops out, can we still hear that you outlining the changes? If the bass drops out and it's just the drums, can you convincingly convince us that you know the form? We hear the form. We hear the changes. We hear your motivic and melodic development, your rhythmic development. We hear the language that you're speaking. Play along should be used after you dealt with some of that other stuff. Because at a beginning age and the beginning level of musicianship and jazz improvisation, it's important to know these things when you're approaching learning a song or playing over a song. You need to be able to know where you are as the form is moving. Because if you are trying to figure out what to play over chord changes using play along, you are trying to deal with what to play, keeping time, looking at the form while it's moving, rhythm section. You're dealing with everything at once. But if you haven't dealt with the fundamentals, of the song that you're practicing to play along with, it's kind of counterproductive. Maybe you could spend some time listening to the tune and trying to learn the form, listening to the play along and not playing with it, or listening to some examples from some real records, listening to the bass player with your saxophone and be like, okay, it's G for this bar, okay, it's A for this bar and D, then it goes to G again, then it's C, then F, then B flat. Memorizing where the chords and how they are moving. Why is this important? Why is this so different from play along? Well, it's different because you're starting to learn more so by ear than by reading. You're learning by reading. You're depending on what you see to get you where you're going. You know what I'm saying? Than what you hear. And I know, in this day and age that we live in academics and stuff like that, jazz has become so taught on paper than it has been orally. Everything got to have a name. Everything has to have a description. Everything has to be seen on paper, and that makes the young jazz musicians sound school. Let's make this real simple. Back when you was learning addition, subtraction, how did you learn that? Did you learn 2 + 2, 4 + 4 by looking at a chart that had all of the problems and the answers on them, and all you did was look at it and study it?
Okay, yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4. Yeah, 3 plus 3 is 6. Yeah, 5 plus 2, it says that's 7.
Or did you do this? Okay, 2 plus 2, 2, 3, 4. 5 plus 7, okay, 5, 6, 7. What does this start to do to your mind? It starts to make you be mentally conscious of the act of addition, the act of subtraction. Even if you're doing tally marks, you're still learning something, without looking at something that has the problems and the answers to learn it. I don't remember seeing a chart with the ABCs on it and studying that chart to learn my ABCs. I imagine at a young age that would take a long time to learn them. How we learned them? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. You know what I'm saying? That's how we learned our ABCs. Imagine if you had to read your ABCs and memorize them like that, and you never heard that song before, and nobody sat with you and said, okay, A, B, C. The same thing can be approached with music, learning how to improvise, jazz. Charlie Parker Train, Joe Henderson, Johnny Hodges, Lester Young. Where were they play-alongs at? Where were their real books at? Why are they so great? It makes you think. Maybe they were doing some of this too. Maybe they were just listening to phonographic records with that needle and moving and putting it back and pushing it. Maybe they were learning that way. I doubt they had their standards all printed out on paper and some recording of a rhythm session that they just played along with. You can use the play-alongs, and it's a good tool. It's a good advancement in technology when it comes to learning this music. But at the same time, I think that there are a lot of other things that are important as a young player. If you're not that familiar with that, you should study those things before you bring it to a play-along. You want to come to the play-along knowing the tune, knowing where you are, knowing the form, knowing what you can use. If you don't know those things, if you're playing on a play-along, that play-along is supporting you. When I was using that and playing with that, I knew the tune, I knew the bars in the tune, the sections, I knew what I can play over each chord, and I knew how the tune moved because I've listened to the original recordings, I've listened to other people's recordings, I've transcribed, solos, so I know how to maneuver through this form. Play along at that point becomes a good tool, but it's still not ideal because I am not able to create instances with the rhythm section. I'm not able to create tension and release. I can make my own tension, and they do a good job on that particular play along of expecting tension that you might be creating. So in closing, I don't think play alongs are bad. I just think that their expectations and their use should have some sort of idea. Like I wouldn't depend on them for everything, as well as I still think that there are several things that you should have tidied up and cleaned up before using the play along as a main source or main tool. Nothing is going to replace a real rhythm section and real musicians. That is way more beneficial than play alongs, as well as practicing along with records too as well. But the other things that I mentioned, those things should have other methods of practice to take care of before you bring it to the play along.